Welcome to Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in Long Beach, joined by John Chiang. He is the treasurer of the state of California. You had been controller of the state for 8 years. To many of us, we're not really sure what the difference is between controller and treasurer. Now that you're on the job for about a year as treasurer, what's the difference? How are your duties distinctive?
So they're terrific. So the state treasurer is California's banker. I'm responsible for the short-term investments.
Okay.
So in a given day, I could be investing $65 to $70 billion of local government, some state bond monies. And then I'm also the agent of sale of California's debt. We have over $75 billion of bonds for roads, bridges, hospitals, other essential infrastructure for the state of California. And then I chair over a dozen economic development authorities. So the Teslas to taco trucks we finance out of the treasurer's office, EV charging stations as we move to a green economy. The controller is the state's chief fiscal officer. I was the accountant. I was the auditor. If you remember, I audited the city of Bell, Los Angeles Community College. I handled disbursements. I did 47 million disbursements. You might have seen my
Your name on the check.
Right on the check. And then we returned $3.1 billion of people's unclaimed property.
Of course, I remember that,
so
the unclaimed website.
A lot of those great programs.
So do you work with the controller now?
I do, yeah, very closely. Betty's doing a really terrific job, working really hard, and she's growing the programs that we started and doing it very well. I started electronic filing of unclaimed property.
Yes.
We got it up to $1,000. She just raised it to $5,000 to make it easier to return people's money. So
I actually had some money in there.
Terrific. Did you get it?
I got it, and it was funny. I thought I had cleared the account, and then I was interviewing Assemblyman Jimmy Gomez, and he surprised me with a check. They found more money. So it was actually very funny.
Well, check it twice a year, right? We update it. Businesses continually have a reporting responsibility.
I see.
So
that's how he found it. I want to talk to you about affordable housing. I wouldn't have thought that the treasurer would be involved in affordable housing, but he is, you are. Explain the treasurer's role in the affordable housing formula.
Yeah, so the treasurer's front and center in regards to the regulatory authorities at the state level or financing authorities. So I sit on 3 of the 4 state housing authorities or agencies that are responsible for housing. It's all these letters. It's TCAC, Tax Credit Allocation Committee. It handles some of the work. CDLAC, California Debt Limit Allocation Committee, and CalHFA. And so they have the 9% credit, the 4% credit, a mix of bonds in there, and we package the monies and works with some of the rules and regulations so that we can create affordable housing for the veterans, for homeless, for seniors, for the disabled, for people of low incomes. And
given that you're a tax lawyer, and we're glad about that, you have been able to kind of dig into the regulations and figure out a formula whereby California can access $6.5 billion more for affordable housing. And it's not our funds, it's Fed funds, correct? Did I say that right?
This is access to what the federal government has in resources. So what I did is we reduced the regulatory burden. We allowed developers who had multiple projects to, depending on certain circumstances, only file 1 report. We reduced the number of points to put together some of these projects so that we can develop more affordable housing. It's complex, right, because you have rural housing, you have urban housing.
But how were you able to get to $6.5 billion? I'm not denying that that's the number, but what was it that got us to that number?
Oh yeah, you get into technical finance like basis, right? The use of debt, carryover debt, and so you're allowing them to create additional basis, giving them additional access to tax credits. It's that financial mumbo jumbo world that we work in that I'm very excited about because at the end of the day, you just see people get their housing.
But the good news is you were able to work through the regs. Now what? I mean, I believe you made this announcement just 4, 6, 8 weeks ago. What happens next? I mean, does the money arrive like that, or how do we move forward?
No, so what happens is we have rounds of applications where the developers come forward. They have to score certain points to make sure that we will finance their projects. And those who score and qualify can go forward and understand that they have these tax credits available to make up the gaps. When you put together affordable housing, there's a federal piece to it, there's a state piece to it, a local government piece, and there's gaps, right? Because if you have somebody who's homeless or poor, they don't make up as much of a portion as we do in the private sector. You have to
Sure.
make your mortgage payment, your rent payment. Somebody who's struggling financially doesn't make that contribution or as much of that contribution. So you have to get more from local governments or more from state government or federal government. And so we're expanding how much they can contribute to make up that difference.
I understand.
Otherwise, the gap.
As you know, California had a very robust affordable housing program through redevelopment. The tax increment was a certain portion of it at least set aside for affordable housing. That program was eliminated by Governor Brown. And for the last few years, we kept hearing that there were going to be efforts to revitalize affordable housing, maybe not through redevelopment, but a version of. Well, this year, aside from what you have done, the legislature had a couple of bills. Speaker Tony Atkins, very strong in trying to get some money into the affordable housing arena. She had a bill that even was signed off by the California Association of Realtors, a document transfer fee. I think it was going to be $75 per document. When you have the California Association of Realtors saying yes, you figure it's going to be fine. Bill died. She also had another bill, I think it was $100 million worth of funding, vetoed by the governor. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, so that's a 2-year effort by the Speaker, and I give great credit to
Right.
Speaker Atkins for having that vision. As you pointed out earlier in your comments, there used to be a 20% set aside for low mod affordable housing that the local governments would make that contribution.
Right.
When the state ran into financial trouble, a lot of those monies were taken away from education.
Right.
So the governor said, let's shut that down. Let's make sure that, let's pay back the over $10 billion that we owe to education.
Right.
Right, but it left local government without that local
Right.
economic development tool.
Right.
So they created these enhanced infrastructure districts, sort of like the redevelopment agencies, but not exactly the same. You don't have that same set of
The enterprise zones, or
The-
the revised enterprise zones?
Yeah, so the enhanced infrastructure districts. So you don't have that money that otherwise was taken away from education for economic development, but it can be taken away from other pots if people voluntarily agree to set aside that money and get paid back later on in the future.
But is it fair to say that we are not even close to where we were in terms of funding for affordable housing?
Yes.
So you're working on your side. The legislature was trying to get more money to come in. Like you said, at least the document transfer bill is now a 2-year bill. So possibly Speaker Atkins, soon to be former Speaker Atkins, whatever, Member Atkins, is going to push that forward. But another bill that she tried to push through got unanimous support, Republicans, Democrats, vetoed by the governor. I'm skeptical, I guess I would say. I mean, do you think that we can really revitalize affordable housing outside of your efforts?
So that last piece was David Chu, who's a terrific assembly member
right.
out of San Francisco. A lot of it would be directed to help the homeless. What had happened was, this governor's fiscally prudent, and I greatly appreciate that, having had to issue IOUs as controller.
I remember.
To keep us from going off the fiscal cliff. Because the court case throwing out the Medi-Cal taxation here in California,
I know
or
what you're
impacting Medi-Cal, right? That would have been a $1.1 billion abyss that we have to fill,
Right.
and the governor wants to make sure that we don't go off the fiscal cliff.
But our revenues are coming in so strong.
They are.
His estimates were so conservative that we're flush with cash, relatively speaking. So isn't now the time to invest, one could argue?
Yeah, well, while we're having some more money, right, we have to make sure that we pay back all the bills, right?
Right.
We did a better job, got out of our $30 billion cash deficit, but we have to start incorporating, as you pointed out, these other notions, the things that grow the economy. Education, housing, infrastructure, make sure that we have a sustainable form of financing for those activities, because building affordable housing not only houses people, lowers mental health incidence issues, better academic sustainability, creates jobs.
His name is John Chiang. He is the treasurer of the state of California. My name is Brad Pomerance in Long Beach today. This is Charter Local Edition.